Our story kicks off in the year 20X Japan at T University, where a man is furiously typing away on his keyboard. This guy, representative from a pharmaceutical company, is here to discuss a joint research project. But Yukatani's focus shifts when he glances through the flashback. That same girl from the photo is now lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by medical equipment. Her younger sister, innocent and hopeful, asks Yukatani if taking the medicine and getting some sleep will help her big sister. Realizes he can't move. A sharp headache hits. The girl, who introduces herself as his maid, tells him he was struck by lightning. Or maybe a memory from a past life? Then it clicks. He remembered Charlotte reintroduced Falma to his own family through portraits displayed in the mansion. She pointed to a middle-aged man, explaining that he was Bruno de Medicis, Falma's father, and the current president of the Imperial School of Pharmacy. On the left was a portrait of his mother, Beatrice, with a young girl sitting on her lap, his younger sister Blanche. Pride and status. Losing the ability to use divine arts could mean being stripped of noble status and even being exiled by the church. Later, in his room, Falma thought about what world. Naturally, he was nervous, but those nerves didn't last long. His family welcomed him warmly. His father, Bruno, was especially relieved. Seeing that Falma's mind hadn't been affected by the lightning strike, he happily declared that Falma could continue studying with his tutor, Eleanor. The next day, legendary being. But Falma brushed it off, saying it was just a Lichtenberg figure, basically a burn pattern from the lightning strike. Eleanor didn't buy, tried to calm down and rest for a bit, but Falma noticed something. She had a small injury on her finger. When he pointed it out, Eleanor was confused. That's when Falma started explaining a new ability. He said he could detect injuries and illnesses. If the affected area glowed white, the condition was still unknown. The next day, Falma's father, Bruno, told him that Eleanor wouldn't be able to teach him today. She had come down with a high fever and was thinking about quitting entirely. Curious, Bruno asked Falma if he had any idea what might have caused this sudden change. Falma flashed back to the previous day, the water spear incident, his glowing mark, and the part where he had no shadow. Yeah, he kind of scared her off. Trying to play it cool, Falma acted clueless and suggested the fever might have just gotten to her. Bruno, without question, believed him and handed Falma a potion and a letter to deliver to Eleanor. When Falma arrived at her home, he found her in full armor. Yeah, seriously. She was fully geared up, ready to defend herself, thinking Falma had come to silence her. Falma, completely caught off guard, tried to calm her down. Seeing he was unarmed, Eleanor relaxed a bit, but still stayed by the door, not letting her guard down. She asked him what he was doing there. Falma explained that his father had sent him with a potion to help her recover. At first, Eleanor seemed to calm down, until she panicked again, now convinced the potion was poison. Falma had to quickly explain that he wasn't there to hurt her, and he genuinely wanted her to keep tutoring him. But Eleanor didn't think that was possible. In her eyes, Falma was the incarnation of Panatheos, a divine being who didn't need lessons from a mere mortal. She begged him to spare her life. Falma, confused but sincere, told her the truth. He had no idea how to properly use divine arts. More than anything, he needed her help. Realizing he couldn't convince her just through words, Falma gave her a gift, cerulean flowers, her favorite, as thanks for all she had taught him. Then he said goodbye and left. As the afternoon went by, Eleanor sat thinking. Should she continue teaching Falma? Was he really dangerous? But the more she thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. Panatheos was known as a kind guardian. Falma hadn't hurt her. He'd even remembered her favorite flower. Looking at the bouquet in her hands, she made her decision. She'd continue tutoring him. The next morning, Falma sat at the dining table with his parents. Bruno looked serious. Beatrice, on the other hand, was clearly worried. Then, Bruno broke the news. Falma's little sister Blanche had come down with chickenpox. They had no choice but to isolate her for a full week. But Beatrice was anxious. Blanche was still so young, and leaving her alone for that long felt cruel. Since Falma had already gotten chickenpox 4 years ago, he was immune. So he was chosen to stay with his younger sister Blanche during her week-long isolation. Wanting to help, Falma made a special medicine to speed up her recovery, especially since Blanche didn't like taking medicine because of how bitter it tasted. While spending time with his sister, Falma made a startling discovery. People in this world had no concept of viruses or bacteria. Instead, they blamed unexplained diseases on demons. Realizing how dangerous that ignorance could be, Falma decided to build a Leeuwenhoek-style microscope so he could examine tiny organisms without having to rely on his right hand's divine art. But just as he was admiring his new invention, the family butler appeared, saying his father wanted to see him in the study. When Falma arrived, Bruno told him they had received an urgent message from the Empress. Her condition had taken a turn for the worse, and they needed to go see her immediately. Once they arrived, Bruno began treating the Empress. She had contracted a disease the locals called White Death, and her condition was already critical. Got to work. To avoid the bacteria developing drug resistance, he knew he needed at least. Bruno burst into the room, demanding to know what he was doing. He scolded Falma, warning him not to give patients false hope, and definitely not to administer something that could be poison. But in the middle of that confrontation, Bruno noticed something. The holy mark of Panakthios on Falma. He froze. Could it be? His son? The reincarnation of a divine being? After taking it all in, Bruno stepped back and accepted the truth, White Death. And more importantly, they now had medicine to treat it. With treatment started, the Empress' condition improved rapidly. All she needed now was a few days of rest, and she'd be back to full health. Her recovery wouldn't have been possible without the contributions of both Falma and his father, Bruno. As a reward for their service, the Empress gave them special honors. Bruno was granted a large plot of land, rich in medicinal herbs and resources. Meanwhile, Falma was officially appointed as a royal pharmacist. But more than that, his longtime wish was granted. The Empress approved his request to open his very own pharmacy. And just like that, Falma's pharmacy, the Parallel World Pharmacy, was born. With support from his parents, who helped fund the initial costs, and with Falma's knowledge of modern medicine, the pharmacy grew fast. Soon, it became well known across the region, and Falma was finally able to do what he'd always dreamed of: help people. On a rare vacation day, Falma found himself at the beach with his little sister Blanche, their maid Charlotte, and Falma activated a powerful divine art, forming a barrier around them underwater. Even the sand under her feet was dry. Back on the shore, Blanche was crying hard, saying it was terrifying. Detected abnormal traces of divine power in the area. With this report, the head bishop issued a command to all priests across the St. Fleuve Empire. Discovered Falma's shadowless status, they might try to purify him. For now, Falma would have to stay cautious until the threat passed, or he found a way to deal with it. Attacking the de Medicis family's pharmacy wasn't just property damage, it was basically a declaration of war. He told Falma that whoever was responsible would pay dearly. He then asked Falma if he had any idea who might have done it. Falma's thoughts immediately went to the Pharmacists' Guild and the two robed figures snooping around the day before. While Falma was discussing with his assistant how they'd serve clients in the meantime, one of their regular customers suddenly showed up. Falma remembered Eleanor's warning about the church and their holy kingdom. Sweat broke out as he knew he had to avoid them at all costs. The same words his father Bruno and teacher Eleanor had spoken before, and he was surprised. The priests were stunned. They realized they had just attacked their own guardian deity. They all knelt in guilt, especially Solomon, who led the attack. To atone for their blasphemy, Falma stopped him, saying he didn't want anyone to get hurt and only wanted them to leave his pharmacy alone, and saw that Solomon's left leg was fractured. The bone glowed white, meaning it could heal. As Falma considered treatment, his first thought was amputation. Falma started the operation alone. Thanks to his dedication and skill, he was able to heal Solomon and fix his leg. Grateful for the healing and Falma's kindness in forgiving their sins, the priests thanked him. Several months later, Solomon returned to the clinic bearing gifts. He presented Falma with a magic staff and urged him to hold it. The church would keep it a secret and handle everything. A few months after that, a letter arrived from their older brother, warning that a disease was spreading. Some infected carriers were headed toward the kingdom, putting the entire realm on high alert. The ports were heavily guarded to monitor and purify any incoming cargoes and crew, aiming to stop the Black Death from spreading. Despite these measures, some crew members resisted inspections, insisting they had the proper documents to enter. The commotion only ended when Mr. Jean, a regular customer at Pharma's pharmacy, showed up. Jean was the leader of St. Fleuve's Scarlet Fleet. His arrival calmed tensions at the port. People feared his fleet and didn't want to provoke them. Still, the fleet knew patrols were active at every port, so they decided to reroute and find a different place to dock and reach the mainland. Meanwhile, news came that a village had been infected. Pharma immediately left the port and headed there. When he arrived, he found villagers living in fear, convinced their village was cursed and wanting to flee. But Pharma couldn't allow that. Letting them escape risked spreading the Black Death, something he wasn't willing to risk. Pharma tried to convince the villagers not to run, but they refused and argued with him. He didn't back down. Using his divine art, he created an ice dome around the entire village, promising them they wouldn't die and that he would cure everyone. Hearing this and seeing his power, the villagers calmed down and began to trust him. When Pharma reached the most affected part of the village, he was surprised to find the church already there, treating the infected. The number of infected people shocked him, but he immediately got to work curing them. After he finished, church members told Pharma that the smugglers responsible were still at large, but they'd been captured and the infected contained. Relieved, Pharma thanked them and went to interrogate the smugglers himself. During the interrogation, Pharma learned the whole thing was orchestrated by someone else. The cargo smuggled was animals infected with the Black Death, and these animals were being escorted to the capital by the Holy Knights. Pharma rushed to the capital, but it was too late. The Holy Knights had already arrived, bringing infected animals ready to spread the disease. Thanks to instructions from Pharma's father, Bruno, they managed to defeat the Knights and prevent most animals from spreading infection. When Pharma reached the capital, most of the danger had passed, though a few infected animals remained scattered. Then, Pharma sensed something ominous coming from his clinic. Panicked because he had just sent Charlotte there, he rushed over with Bruno. At the clinic, they found Charlotte and Cedric injured and bleeding on the floor. Standing over them was Camus, the mastermind behind the attack. Camus was once condemned for inhumane acts and burned alive, but somehow returned as an evil spirit, determined to see the world's destruction. Bruno decided to distract Camus while instructing Pharma to heal Charlotte and Cedric. Though Bruno fought bravely, Camus easily overpowered him, but this gave Pharma enough time to heal the two. Pharma was furious at Camus, saying a doctor's role was to save lives, not destroy them. He vowed to defeat Camus, who challenged Pharma with a grim message, that one day, ordinary people would see Pharma the way he did and fall to darkness. Pharma rejected this idea completely. With a single punch, Pharma purified Camus and ended his reign of terror in the capital. The city celebrated the victory, and the Empress publicly declared the Black Death over and the people safe. With peace restored, Pharma's pharmacy returned to normal, and the city's smiles returned.